Two central figures convicted for bribing former Michigan House Speaker Rick Johnson in the largest public corruption scandal in Michigan's capital in 30 years have been freed from federal prison despite serving less than half of their sentences, and Johnson could soon join them. Marijuana industry lobbyist Vince Brown left a low-security prison in western Pennsylvania on August 6, 3 weeks after Oakland County businessman John DeWard DeLay was also released from a minimum security prison camp in West Virginia. Both served less than 9 months of a 20-month sentence for conspiring to bribe Johnson, the former chairman of the Michigan Medical Marijuana Licensing Board, while DeLay was granted compassionate release from prison less than 9 months into 28-month sentence for bribing Johnson. And the moves raise questions about whether justice was served in a high-profile public corruption case involving bribes paid to the state's top regulator, as businesses sought a competitive edge at the dawn of the Michigan marijuana industry. In a quote, "This does seem like it's not justice," said Mathieu St, a criminal defense lawyer in Detroit who specializes in marijuana cases, also says the legacy of these improper actions are still very much with us. A Federal Bureau of Prison spokesman declined to explain why Brown was released from prison, but the release of two figures in a high-profile bribery scandal continues a trend of businessmen, labor lenders, and politicians from Metro Detroit being released early from federal prison after being convicted of public corruption crimes. On Wednesday, the 71-year-old Johnson, a Republican from Leroy, asked a federal judge to release him from prison, citing various health problems. Johnson asked to be released on a minimum security federal prison camp in Minnesota after serving less than 9 months of a 55-month sentence. He was sentenced last fall for taking $110,200 in bribes and committing what U.S. District Judge Jane Beckenridge called unfettered abuse of power. He is scheduled to be in prison until August of 2027, and the sentence capped a years-long investigation into Johnson's actions as chairman of the state's Medical Marijuana Licensing Board, nominated by then Senate Majority Leader Arlen Meekahoff and appointed by then Governor Rick Snyder. Johnson, a fellow Republican, chaired the state's Medical Marijuana Licensing Board from May of 2017 through April of 2019, and his panel had the power to influence regulations and decide which businesses could get into the market first. Beckering said Johnson had taken advantage of his position to collect cash payments for himself and feast on free meals and satisfy his own sexual desires. The judge said Johnson had taken at least 42 bribes over 20 months, including cash payments ranging from $1,000 to $20,000 and services of a prostitute who called him Batman. You remember that, Rico? Johnson's request for compassionate release portrayed him as an ill man, and he asked the warden in Minnesota for compassionate release in February, citing a list of ailments including heart problems, and the warden refused, saying Johnson had only served 4% of his sentence. In a quote, "While you have a medical condition, it is not terminal or debilitating," the warden wrote. Next, Johnson asked the judge for compassionate release. And federal judges are allowed to reduce an inmate's sentence and grant compassionate release based on extraordinary or compelling reasons, and after wardens have rejected or ignored requests nationwide, federal judges have granted compassionate releases to more than 5,310 people since the fall of 2019. Johnson faces long odds if he hopes to go home because federal judges on the west side of Michigan have only released 13 or 3% of the 410 inmates who sought compassionate release since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. And there are 94 federal judicial districts nationwide, and judges in the Western District of Michigan, where Johnson case was prosecuted, rejected 96% of all compassionate release requests from 2020 to 2022. That rate of rejection trailed only district courts in 4 other states: Arkansas, Georgia, Oklahoma, and Texas, according to the U.S. Sentencing Commission. And there has been a severe drought of compassion in sentencing and compassionate release on the west side of Michigan, Birmingham defense lawyer Wade Fink said. He also says, by and large, I think it's a good thing that there is a safety valve for courts to decide when extraordinary and compelling circumstances exist to let someone out of prison, Fink said. He also says, I don't think people should look at this as someone's not serving enough punishment for that. And this is how it reflects on being too lenient on people, Fink said. Oftentimes what gets lost in the headlines are some of the underlying factors that you would never know, like someone's terminal health or a need to care for an infant who did not have another caretaker. The marijuana industry scandal led to 4 convictions last year, including 46-year-old Lansing lobbyist Brian Pierce. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison, and records show he is incarcerated at a medium security prison in Pennsylvania until May of 2025. And Brown and DeLay must serve 2 years under court oversight, but it was unclear whether Brown, 34, was transferred to a halfway house in Detroit or if he was released to home detention. And during a brief interview on Thursday, Brown said he was released after receiving credits available for good behavior in prison and through the First Step Act, a federal law that takes into account several factors, including an inmate's age, general health, and lack of prior criminal record. Inmates with good conduct in prison can cut 54 days off of each year in their sentence and be sent to the halfway houses 6 months early and receive credit for time spent in custody before being sentenced. Under the First Step Act, inmates can earn 15 days off of every 30 days working in prison or by participating in other programs. And Brown, who said he is employed overseeing his real estate portfolio, said the criminal case focused on small part of his career when was a young lobbyist before he opened his own firm. And in a quote says, you guys are going to love this. I ran my own business for 6 years, and it was part of the investigation whatsoever, Brown said. I feel like mistakes were made when I was young and in the wrong partnerships, and that put a huge shadow over that good business I ran for 6 years. At least 14 people convicted of corruption in recent years have been released early, and that includes Detroit City Council. You want to read this, you can read the rest of this on our website. I want to hear what you guys have to say. What do you guys say about this, Rico? I know you're going to love to talk about this.
Man, this guy, man, I'm gonna hold off on the joke that write themselves about certain aspects to keep this as balanced as possible. But I think it's very peculiar. I don't know if you've seen that the recent story of the judge in Detroit that put that little girl, in cuffs and sent her to juvenile detention for falling asleep on a field trip in court. And they're letting dudes like this that are clearly the scum of the industry. They're letting him out early.
Yeah,
things are topsy-turvy right now, and I would not be surprised if this guy ends up heading Tilray, Michigan brands.
Oh boy. Oh man.
You think he found his boy Robin in prison?
No, he had a prostitute that called him Batman. I remember.
There's somebody. You think it's just that one lady? Like that was just their thing? Only you can call me Batman, girl. I bet he does. It's not new. That's not new.
I just wonder.
Robin.
I think it's a shame this guy's getting out while so many people who haven't done anything wrong and are good for this industry and help build this fucking industry are sitting there.
I just wonder if he called her Catwoman.
Agreed. Yeah.
Oh boy.
Was she?
All right, Rico.
I'm not gonna go there.
All right, Rico.
I'm gonna keep things PG-13 today.
All right.
We don't want to lose monetization on this episode.
Fair enough.
I'm a big fan of Halle Berry. I was a big fan of Halle Berry, though. But the relationship between Batman and Robin was very strange, to say the least.
That's what I was. All right. Anyhow, moving on.
Yeah, I mean, this is major. I'm just shocked that these guys aren't. Like I thought with federal sentences, there's mandatory minimums and different things like this, and it's crazy to me that they're getting off on such little time. I'm
gonna say I'm pretty sure he had something. He had a lot on the powers that be, and if he did not get a truncated sentence. You would hear a lot more about how far up the corruption goes in cannabis, in Michigan cannabis. Mm-hmm. So we've seen a lot of breadcrumbs over the last couple of years, me and you, Jason. Certain things we can talk about, certain things we cannot talk about, and it's bad. Mm-hmm. And it started with guys like this, and this guy probably took a rap for a lot of other people, and he got out early, in my opinion. I think he got out early because he kept his mouth shut.
Yep. Fair enough.
I said it, damn it.
Fair enough.